What is the common thread that connects us all?
Sometimes we feel alone and we believe that we are the only person on earth who could possibly feel this way.
But maybe we all have more in common than we think.
So, we're asking for people's point of view to talk about their experiences in an attempt to better ourselves and find the common thread that connects us all. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Anaheim Stoneworks and Master Toddy LA Training Center.
Our guest today is a dear friend of mine. She is a licensed clinical psychologist with a unique background, which includes a strong forensic basis, having worked at the Twin Towers County Jail in Los Angeles, Chino State Prison, and the California Youth Authority. She has worked with the severely mentally ill, violent offenders, and the incompetent to stand trial program. It's truly an honor to introduce to you my dear friend, Dr. Mandy Neeble. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. Sounds like you have a pretty detailed bio. It seems like you've accomplished a lot.
Thank you.
It's impressive. So, tell me, I'm curious, being a female, what's the craziest thing you saw in jail?
Working with the severely mentally ill, violent offenders was definitely the craziest, because at that point, not only were you addressing a severe mental illness, but then you're also dealing with a very severe violent offense. And so a lot of times they were going to be serving 25 to life, and there wasn't a lot for them to lose. And at the same time, there wasn't a lot of comprehension on the mental side of what they did.
So what can you do with someone like that? What kind of work can you do?
It's finding a connection with them, some of the most powerful experiences that I've had in therapy were with the very, very severely mentally ill. And one guy that still stands out in my mind of everyone I saw, he had committed a very, very heinous crime. And he was extremely mentally ill. He had schizophrenia and had not only the audio hallucinations, but he also had visual and tactile.
What was the crime?
He was in a state hospital out of state, and the devil started speaking to him, letting him know he needed to go and kill his brother. So he escaped from the penitentiary psych unit and drove all the way to California. And in the process of heading to his brother's house to kill himself, a young 18-year-old girl was walking out of a tanning salon, and he walked up to her and shot her point blank, and then went and ate a steak at the local steakhouse.
No big deal.
Yeah.
So real quick, how did you, that's intense stuff. How did you, just going back now, what drove you to get into this field? That's obviously, just looking at your presence and stuff, it's probably the last thing I would expect to see when I went to jail. I didn't see anybody.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, no, not definitely.
No, my passion has always been to work with the others, the people that no one else wants to work with, and the ones that have a huge social stigma.
Did you know that a long time ago?
Yes, I knew at age 12 that that's what I wanted to do.
Age 12, what?
So I grew up in the most amazing home you could possibly imagine. My parents are everything that you would want in parents. I never heard screaming. I never saw them argue. We were a strong Christian church family. My parents,
really, really cool.
They're so in love. They've been married for 41 years, getting ready to be married for 42. And they still color coordinate their clothes.
That's amazing.
That's
probably why we get along so well.
They're so in love. It's just crazy. And I always was intrigued with the criminal mind, and I never understood how someone could do something so heinous, because my life was nothing like that. I couldn't imagine what they must have gone through. And right at age 12 was when Jeffrey Dahmer was on trial for all of his crimes. And I remember looking at my mom and saying, how could somebody do
Who's
something?
Jeffrey Dahmer? I'm not familiar with that name, sorry.
Jeffrey Dahmer is the guy that killed an insane amount of people and then would actually eat them.
Okay.
So,
ew.
Yes, he is one of the world's most dangerous serial killers. He's dead now. But he was on trial for all these crimes. And I remember asking my mom, how could someone do something so heinous? And she said, I have no idea. And I said, well, I'm going to find out. And I knew at that moment, at age 12, that I wanted to work in psychology, and I wanted to work with those that no one else wanted to work with.
That's awesome.
And so I purposely in the prisons would always ask for the extremely severe mentally ill and the ones that had the most violent crimes. And like with the guy that I was telling you about, no one else could kind of work with him and get to him.
Weren't you scared?
No, and I think that that's what they always felt.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would go and I would talk to him, and he would just full on talk to me. And he actually would ask the guards when Doc was coming back. And no one else, I mean, they just serve him his food through the tray. They wasn't allowed to come out because he was so violent towards everyone. And with me, I could actually put my hand in, and he would place his hand in my hand. And he was he would talk to me, but there was a connection. And he ended up being able to begin to process what he had done.
So have you found an answer to your question why people do these things?
I mean, through the years, I don't think I have like the one ultimate reason, but I truly believe it is the impact of the way they are raised a lot, that it really does come down to the home life. And I know a lot of people will say, well, it's the peers and it's this.
How much is mental play in that, like mental illness and stuff?
I think it does play drastically into it, but I also think that it's looking at the home life. And when they went back with Jeffrey Dahmer specifically, they were able to look at abandonment and abuse and, you know, one parent not really being there so much, and that he had a lot of outward behaviors that were extremely disturbing, and it was just kind of not looked at. And so I think that especially if you can catch it before the age of 11, they're going to have an opportunity to go into a different direction. And then so for me, I think one of the core values is the way that they're raised and the parenting styles. And yes, there's going to be a distinction in there of the mental illness, or if there's the gene of addiction, and the peers are going to have a role in that. But ultimately, I think it goes back to the parents.
I've noticed a huge difference with parents that are on point in the child's life versus distant and kind of not really raising them. I mean, there's a huge difference just in attitude as 5, 6, 7-year-olds.
And I think it's the same with success as well. When you look at extremely successful people, the majority of them had a good home life where they were taught about morals and ethics and what strong work ethic is, and there was the ability to be creative, and they had someone behind them that was saying, you can achieve this and you can do this.
Self-confidence.
The self-confidence, which built self-esteem, which built an optimistic viewpoint for them. And if you don't have someone early on, I think, that encourages you, and where there's an optimistic environment, I think it's going to be you're going to be easily swayed to be able to kind of go more into the negativity.
On that, so particularly about the people that you've worked with in the prison systems, what are some of the things that you've given them insight that have had these violent offenders, maybe that, I don't know if they'll ever come out of jail, or ones that maybe do? What are some of the best things that you've given them and seen work?
I think the best thing you can give them is support and understanding, and show them compassion. And for the ones that were going to be released back to society, I really worked with them more on the rehabilitation, because prison itself is not rehabilitation, it's punishment. And if someone's locked away for a long period of time and there's no true rehabilitation, they're going to go back out and they're not going to have any insight in what not to do.
They'll just reoffend and keep doing that and still have the same underlying issues.
And that's why the recidivism rate is almost close to 90%.
Yeah.
I mean, that is wise, because there's not a lot of rehabilitation. So each inmate that I had come in, and it's the same now with every client that I see or every family that I work with, it is, what can you do differently? And how can you have a different point of view and learn from the things that have occurred and change them?
I've heard a lot more about treating people in jail for the mental illnesses and whatnot. Is that on the rise now? Is that more popular to actually treat people than it was before?
Definitely. I think now you see it more often than you did 10, 20 years ago. I think now, especially with the prisons and jails are so packed, and I mean, they're having to release people a lot quicker.
Yeah.
I think now they're realizing that the recidivism rate is so high that they have to do something differently. So they are implementing educational programs, the pastoral counseling and church services, there's more of those. They have a lot more therapists that work with the core issues than what they did before.
We've seen a lot with addiction too, though. I mean, a lot of people are getting, turned to go to treatment or, get help in that aspect as opposed to going to jail. And they're seeing a big difference in the return because they're actually being able to learn how to become active members back in society and stuff. I think that's
so
a really
important.
Good point. It
Yeah.
is. It's really, really important as opposed to just being punishment, trying to help them become reacclimated.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
So working with families, that's another thing I really want to talk about just because the family dynamic is very interesting to me. But what is some of the stuff you could give insight to families that are willing to change and wanting to change? What are some of those dynamics they could take as a first step?
You can heal the past and you can address the issues that were there in the past and you can move forward from those. And I think being able to establish strong boundaries and allow there to be some healing time. Allow there to be each member taking responsibility for their part. And I think one of the biggest things I've seen in addiction is that a lot of times the families will take a total hands-off approach and be like, you know what, we send them to treatment, they get fixed, they come home, and we're all great. And it's the families that say, you know what, we probably have a part in this.
Yeah.
And
what can we do total opposite effect on that.
Yeah.
For sure.
And when the families that get involved and say, you know what, I am sorry for this, and I should have done this differently, and I could have approached it this way, and there's open communication, and they each can take what their part is, and they're each willing to do the part and the work that's going to need to go forward, then yeah, they can heal and they can change. It's the initiative that it takes to want the change and to be able to know what your part's going to be in that.
So,
For sure.
off of that, how can someone heal on their own if they come from a family that doesn't want anything to do with it? It's your fault.
Mm-hmm.
You are, I don't know, a bad child or whatever. How
Or
can
just
that...
parents that weren't, correct me if I'm wrong, but parents that aren't even associated with their kids. I know a lot of people that don't really have a family to go to. I mean,
Right.
It's letting go. It's being able to, if you there are a lot of people that are hands off. There's a lot of parents that are no longer alive, or there's people there that just have nothing to do with them, and there's not going to ever be the time to make the amends or to be able to work on it.
Yeah.
And for that person, you work with them on them learning to love themselves. And that's the key. If they can begin to learn themselves, they can begin to forgive their part, and then they can begin to forgive those that have hurt them. And it's letting go of the past and moving on. And I always tell all the patients, you are not a prisoner of your past. And if you can get that through your head and realize that you're not a prisoner of your past, you can move on from that and you can heal even if they're not going to be a part of your life. When they can begin to understand that and have the insight and really, truly, I say do therapy, really engage in the therapeutic process and can begin to feel the compassion and the love for themselves.
I think a lot of people, though, for therapy-wise, because, that's just like another thing with treatment. People are going, another treatment. Can you just give me a bullet point breakdown of what an intensive, really good therapy would be? Even from my knowledge, because there's just so many offers out there of therapists or psychologists, or what would you say a real hardcore therapy session would be?
For me, I'm real and I'm to the point.
No, it's a good question.
I don't skirt around any issues.
Co-sign
I don't co-sign anything. When they first come in my intake process with them, I set them down and say, look, I am going to tell you what you need to hear. I am not going to tell you what you want to hear. And many times you're going to leave here and you're not going to like what is said. But if you want help, then I'm going to provide that help for you.
You're not trying to make friends.
And I know, I'm honest with them, I'm open with them, and I confront their issues head on and say, here's what it is, put it out on the table, and let's start addressing it. So I think in therapy, at the end of a therapy session, they should walk out almost feeling emotionally drained because that therapist should have been able to tap in to all those issues. Which build that trust so where they open up to you.
Which isn't fun, and most people don't want to do that, so that's why a lot of addiction begins in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people need to see the value in it, that actually putting in the hard work and going through that pays off.
It goes back to simply anything worth having is not easy. It goes strictly back to that because I know when I've done intense therapy, when I was doing, just for an example, when I was doing a speech thing for my past, like going back and that was the most mentally draining thing ever, as opposed to when I've worked with a therapist or something just about surface level stuff. It was just like, we're talking. You know, it's like processing as opposed to like doing real work. I could totally relate to that.
You know, and if they're stuck in their denial, being able to help them break through for that and be like, you know, how's that working for you? How's everything currently going in your life? And if you're sitting there and you're saying, you know what, this sucks and I'm not happy here and this isn't going right, okay, then let's change that. Because
do you believe everybody's
not working for you, so let's get it working for you.
Do you believe everybody, you know, holds the, you know, basically they have the control to provide or, you know, basically construct the life that they are, you know, could have?
Yes, definitely. Everybody has it internally. You've got to have somebody that can kind of pull it out.
So can we talk about, going off of that, genetics? How much is genetically determined versus how much choice we have to make changes in our lives?
Definitely. I mean, I think genetics play a huge role, for sure. You know, if you have a genetic predisposition to addiction, or you have a genetic predisposition to a mental illness, that is going to play a part. But in the same way that plays a part, you can put in the work to be able to still fight against that. So if depression, it runs in your family and you grow up knowing that depression runs in your family and you're more prone to depression, if you're willing to show up and do the work in therapy, we can get you past that. And whether that is with medication may be necessary. There may be a true chemical imbalance that needs to be medicated. But at the same time, realizing that the medication isn't the cure. That it's only there to provide one piece, and then the therapeutic, you know, value can come into play.
That's a huge point.
I agree.
But yeah, genetics play a role, but they don't have to define you.
Well, it goes back to everybody, I think, and especially today's society, it's a quick fix. They think the medication's just going to fix them.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a quick fix.
Yes.
But in reality, that's just one key element to what is going to help you get success. But that's not all the work.
No, not at all. There is not a quick fix for anything in life, you know, and I think it takes a lot of people a lot of tries to realize that.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So what has been a good success story? Like maybe someone walked into your office and was worst case scenario and turned out to have the best results.
I worked with a man that was 40 when he came in. He had served 6 years in prison prior.
For what?
And for possession in cells.
Okay.
And so I was working at a rehab, and he came in, and he was severely, severely depressed. He had been in prison for 6 years. He was a huge heroin addict, and he had zero hope. I mean, he really came in, and I asked him in the first initial assessment, what is your goal? And he said to go back to prison. And I said, that's your goal? He said, yeah, when I leave, I have to do this because the court sent me here. And as soon as I leave, I want to do something to go back to prison because that's what I know.
Right.
And I said, well, then what's your second goal? And he goes, to eventually overdose on heroin. And that's how I plan to go out. And he had one of those most traumatic life experiences that you could have had. Like looking back into his history, he had such a severe traumatic childhood. And he was 40 years old, severe heroin addict. He had been using since age 13.
Wow.
And he was so hardened by everything. And so we built this connection in therapy and started working through. And about 3 months in, I said, what is your goal now? And he said, I would love to own my own company someday.
Wow.
And I would love to be able to go back to school. But he had so many educational issues and learning disabilities and the drug use and everything else. And so we ended up, he just kind of surrendered to the process, worked with him for about 1.5 years. And he left treatment. And it was about 3 months later, he showed up at my door. And so I called him by his name and said, what happened? Did we relapse? You know, what's going on? And he had this huge smile on his face. And he came in and he said, you know, Doc, I have to talk to you about something. And it's going to sound crazy, but I really need to talk to you about it. And I said, you can talk to me about anything. He goes, so I just opened my own company. And it just went into 5 different shops. And he goes, and I have this like butterfly sensation in my stomach. And every time I look in the mirror, this is happening. And he was like pointing to his face. And I said, what? And he goes, this. And he's like smiling. He goes, is this what happiness feels like?
Oh my God.
And I said,
wow.
when was the last time you felt that? And he goes, probably about age 4 when I was adopted until, my new family. And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what happiness feels like.
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, he goes, thank you. And he walked out and he goes, it's not going to last forever though, right? And I go, probably not forever. And he goes, but I can always get it back. And I said, exactly. So he came back a year later. He had 2 years of sobriety. And then he texted me at 2.5 and he said, I'm in school. And I said, you went back to school? He said, yeah, I'm going to check in with you. At 3 years, he came into my office. He said, I have 3 years of sobriety and I just graduated with my master's.
That's amazing.
Still on the company.
That's
What?
really amazing.
Yeah. So, and to this day, he still will text me every time he hits his year of sobriety, has a company, it's gone huge, getting his master's. I mean, and the kid, or I call him a kid, but he was a man. I mean, no hope. I mean, his plan was to commit a crime, to go back to prison, and then to overdose on heroin.
It's just another prime example. Anybody can change.
Yeah.
I can't believe I appreciate all the work you do. I've obviously seen a lot of the stuff you've done over the past. You've helped a lot of people, and just really, really love the work that you are able to provide.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to have work in something where you feel like you're giving back and it's actually meaningful.
And
Thank you. I
we
love doing it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi everyone, thanks for watching. Make sure to catch us every Tuesday by subscribing to our channel.
Let us know in the comments below how you make life worth living. We're sure you have lots of great tips to share, and by working together, we can all thrive. I have it memorized.
She's good. I think that's going to be good. One more time, let's do it again.
The speed needs to be a little bit faster. Can you make it a little bit faster?
No, I think it's better that way because I need to be able to hand the mic. We'd like to thank Anaheim Stone for making this show possible. Nothing says luxury like enhancing your surroundings with natural quality stone.
Master Toddy LA Training Center offers authentic Muay Thai training with locations in Bangkok, Pomona, and Anaheim. For more information, visit mastertoddyla.com.